When we left off with our digital painting, we had done a loose sketch. I want to make sure I have layers showing. So whenever you're missing something in your setup, setting up for a digital painting is very important. You always want to go to Window, and you can see the different things up there. So layers, I want to make layers pretty visible. I think it's helpful to have color here. You could view swatches as well. Gradients, patterns, basically color is the most useful, but I'm going to make it pretty small because mostly I want to steal colors from some of my inspirations, including my photo reference. So let's look at how I've set this up. First of all, I have a blank white background, and I'm going to lock that just like I did in digital coloring. So it's protected. Then I have a lot of reference images off to the side that I can steal from. And then I had a large, low opacity version of my photo reference that I used to tweak my sketch. I stretched my sketch to kind of fit it a little bit. So I just know that I'm in the right ballpark now. Now I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to start building on top of my underpainting. So what I'll do is I'll take my underpainting, which I just use kind of an earth tone for, and I'm going to tone it down a little bit. And then I'm also, to about 70%. Then I'm also going to give a new background. I'm going to duplicate that background white, and I'm going to fill it with middle gray. Because now we're not just sketching, now I'm going to do some of that speed painting, that shaped painting. And it's helpful to do it on a toned background. It helps you see the highlights and the shadows equally. And I'm going to lock that for the time being. So I'm going to lock my underpainting because everything now is going to be on top of it. And I'm going to call this my shape painting. So on this shape painting layer, I want to use my brush and build in kind of big gestural, kind of simple blocks of color and edges. And I can use my basic brush for that. I just have a hard round pressure brush, so it's pressure sensitive to size. The color of it is middle gray right now, so I can obviously change that color. And you can see how that would work. So pressure sensitive. It's set to be 58% opaque. I think with my speed paint, I'll probably want to make that a little bit more opaque. And it's set to have a slightly soft edge, a hardness of only 70. So when I zoom in on that brush, it looks very digital. This is what I sketched with. So instead, I'm going to create my own brush. Now to create your own brush, this is what you do. First, I've set all this up, so I'm going to save my work. I've already named it. It's FA21 Digital Painting PSD. I should put my name in there somewhere, but I've saved this architecture. It will save all my layers. It will save all my settings. Now I'm going to create a new Photoshop file by saying File New. And I'm going to ask that this file be 1000 by 1000 pixels. That's what I use as a brush design size. Doesn't matter the resolution because you're putting in the pixels, not the inches. Okay, now I've got a 1000 by 1000 untitled block. Let's see, how can I make Photoshop? On this screen resolution, it's just all very cramped. So I'm going to choose a black color, solid black, and then I'm going to make my brush very hard, 100% hardness, and pretty small. And I'm going to just start, and maybe fully opaque as well. And I'm just going to start scribbling and making kind of a mess at a diagonal. That's kind of an oval shape overall, like the bristles of a brush. And what I'm designing here is the actual stamp brush that Photoshop will use. There are lots of brushes within Photoshop that are already built in. There are lots of ones you can download. They're called ABR files. They are brush files for Adobe brush files. But I want you to know how to create one. And you can do this actually in Photopea as well. There are other videos from other semesters where I show how to do this in Photopea, and you'll see that with all of the digital painting playlists in YouTube. So I always design my brush just very basic, just black on white. And I just want some randomness and variation in there, because all of this is going to layer up. Make it a little bit furrier in some places, maybe have some stray edges. Some people like to scan in an image for a brush, and you can do that. Okay, so now I have this black image. I could erase from this. I could even change opacity if I want, but it's got to be one solid color. So now what I do is I go to Edit, and I'm going to say Define Brush Preset. So if I click that, I'm going to type in F for Fall 2021 Karl's Brush Demo and hit OK. This will only happen within your version of Photoshop. Now if you select, so I just did Command A to select everything and then hit Delete, and because it's a background layer, it'll ask me what do I want to fill it with. I want to fill it with white. So I've just deleted what I put in, but because I defined a brush preset, look. All I have to do is stamp, and now it's a brush. It's a brush which I can control. It's a brush that I can change the size of. Now, unfortunately, when you just do that, it locks it at an angle, which makes it look very digital still. So here are the other ways that we can modify this crazy brush we just built, besides just the size. Notice when it's a custom brush, you won't be able to adjust the hardness. So every time I use it, right now it's locked into the same angle. So this is the next thing we want to do. We want to go up to Window, and you want to look at Brush Settings. Brush settings are fantastic. This is how you can customize any brush. The most important one is up at the top. It's called Shape Dynamics. So click on Shape Dynamics till you get these options. You want to control it based on pin pressure. So that means that as you push harder, it will get bigger. As you are lighter touch, it will get smaller. Next, you want to play with the size jitter. Just like a real brush, your pressure isn't always perfectly even. It's going to wobble a little bit. So I'm just going to set the size jitter a little bit. Then I want to play with the minimum diameter. Maybe I don't want it to go to a pixel big. I want it to be at least 5% big. And now this is, to me, the most important one, the angle jitter. Notice what happens to the preview. I like to put quite a bit of angle jitter on there, and then a little bit of roundness jitter. And all of this just makes it a little bit more varied. All right, now let's see what that brush is like. If I just press once, notice how it's at a different angle and a slightly different size each time I press. And if I do continuous, oh, now it's this lovely, almost random brush at the edges. And then if I set it at a lower opacity, you see how I can really start to get some nice paint-like textures there, especially as I use some different colors. Okay, so because I defined that brush preset, when I go to my brushes, I should see it. I have Karl's brush demo from FA21. This is one I used in a previous semester. And you can build your own brushes this way. But then you always want to play with your brush settings, these shape dynamics, to make it something more controllable. And you can even play with some of the others, like texture or scattering. I don't want to confuse you too much with color dynamics and all of that. We're going to try to keep it pretty straightforward to begin with, but all of this makes a big difference. Okay, so we have now created a brush. I can close this. I can save it, but I don't need to save it because now that brush is in my tools. But with each new painting, I need to control those brush settings, the shape dynamics. But then it will remember it for that project. So I'm going to turn the roundness jitter on quite a bit because I want it to be a little bit more narrow. Okay, now I'm going to set my brush. It can go all the way up to 5,000, but I want it to be closer to like 300. Maybe a little bit bigger. Okay, now I'm ready. I've got these crazy shape dynamics. I'm setting it at an opacity of 70. I'm on my shape painting layer. Now, how do I steal some colors? I can just hold down Option and steal colors directly and start putting them in. So I'll start with some of the colors from my photo reference first. And I'll put in some of the shadows. I've got that sketch underneath, so this is just kind of using that as reference and building in big blocky shapes, kind of like this mushroom-like painting here. Now when I just steal colors from my photo reference, you'll see they're kind of limited. That's why I have these other references, where I might like the colors a little bit more. So this is your own painting. You can do with it whatever you like. And when you're doing your shape painting or your speed painting, try not to zoom in. Try to just cover the whole thing. And if there's a color you find particularly useful, you can just paint it off to the side to steal from. Because with Option, you can always steal your own colors. Now it's good to stay pretty big with your brush and pretty opaque at the beginning. So 70% is pretty opaque. As we refine this, we'll get to kind of smaller brushes, lower opacities. We'll start zooming in. And you learn to paint better by practicing. So there's going to be a lot of kind of going over your brushes, layering up opacities, and then stealing those colors. It's kind of how you blend from. So I want to get some highlights. I don't always want them to be the same. And my best advice in starting out a digital painting is don't get hung up in details. Don't zoom in and try to perfect the eye. Try to work the whole thing all at once. There are lots of tricks for this. Some digital painters like to have the navigator tool showing. So the navigator, they'll usually like put it up here. It will show you what your image looks like from a distance. And so as you zoom in on it, you'll still get to see what it looks like from a distance. That can be helpful.